This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. The cost to fill up your vehicle will soon get a little bit cheaper in Manitoba. The new NDP government introduced legislation today that will cut the provincial gas tax. The CBC's Ian Fraze is live in the newsroom tonight to break it all down for us. So, Ian, the NDP promised a gas tax holiday during the election campaign. Now, you've had a look at the bill that will make this all possible. What does it say?
That provincial gas tax will be eliminated for 6 months if this bill passed. Right now, that tax is at 14 cents a litre. The tax, once lifted, would be on gasoline, diesel, and natural gas when used in motor vehicles. The NDP says this is needed right now because inflation is too high. Here's Finance Minister Adrian Sala.
What we know from other jurisdictions where this type of legislation is passed is that these savings are passed on to consumers. We can't look behind the curtain and see their books, but we do know, again, from other jurisdictions that the savings are passed on and that Manitobans should have every reason to feel confident that when this legislation passes, they will be benefiting from that 14 cent per litre reduction.
So this will last until the end of June. By that time, the government will reassess what to do for the next 6 months. Perhaps the holiday will be extended. The government will bring back the tax or bring it back, but at a lower level.
Now, Ian, also at the legislature today, a different government bill had members of the Métis Nation in a celebratory mood. Ian, how is the government paying tribute to Louis Riel?
This bill, if passed, will make Louis Riel the honorary first premier of Manitoba. Of course, Riel led Manitoba into Confederation in 1870. Years later, he was hanged after leading a resistance. On Thursday, though, Riel was celebrated indoors, as you can see, at a ceremony, jigging and dancing. At an outdoor ceremony, members of the Métis community laid roses at the feet of a statue of Louis Riel outside the legislature. Also part of this bill, we should note, schools will be required to teach students about the significant contributions Riel made to Manitoba. At the indoor ceremony, Premier Wabkanu paraphrased some of Riel's final words before his death.
I will perhaps be one day acknowledged as more than just a leader of the Métis. And this is a direct quote here. And if I am, I will have an opportunity of being acknowledged as a leader of good in this great country. And so today, I believe that we are honoring some of the final words of Mr. Riel.
The NDP wants both of those bills, the one honoring Riel and the gas tax bill, to pass within the next 2 weeks before the legislature rises for the holidays. Riley.
All right, thank you, Ian. Ian Fraze covers the legislature for us. He was live in our newsroom tonight. All right, well, from Broadway to Main Street now, Winnipeg City Councillors are debating a set of major zoning changes this hour. Mayor Scott Gillingham proposed the reforms in order to access millions in federal housing money. But as CBC's Cameron McLean reports, councillors who oppose the changes say there are more questions than answers.
Winnipeggers could see more multi-unit housing projects going up in their neighbourhoods. Housing Minister Sean Fraser made looser zoning rules a condition for approving up to $192 million from the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. Demands include allowing up to 4 units per lot and up to 4 stories near frequent transit as of right, meaning no public hearing would be needed. Some housing advocates celebrated the idea.
Exclusionary zoning has been a nightmare for affordability and growing the rental housing stock and has prevented incremental infill intensification and adaptation to changing needs in mature communities.
But opponents worried about the impact the changes could have.
By this, I would lose the right to be notified if a fourplex is going up beside me. I'd lose the right to influence how that is done. My property value would go down.
Mayor Scott Gillingham has put some limits on those changes. He would limit buildings to 48 feet in height. Approvals would also be subject to lot size specifications. But St. Vital councillor Brian Mays says he needs more details.
I think there was some effort to try and incorporate some of the concerns of councillors. The trouble is it's still vague. We'll have a lot size limit. What's that? Is it 25 feet wide, 50 feet wide? We don't know.
Gillingham says the zoning rules still need to go through a process.
that will be a rapid rezoning process that will include a public hearing. All those specifics related to lot size and building standards can be ironed out and will be fleshed out then.
That process is expected to start in spring 2025. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The chief of Long Plain First Nation is fighting against an effort to hold an early election in her community. A by-election is slated to be held December 7th for the First Nation near Portage La Prairie. Kyra Wilson was elected the chief of Long Plain in 2022. David Meaches, who finished second, appealed the election result and lost. Meaches then went to federal court, which told Long Plain to appoint a new appeal committee. That committee recommended a by-election. Wilson says this new race is against Long Plain's election rules. She's now gone to the Federal Court of Appeal to try and have the by-election set aside. It was back to work this morning for 300 educational assistants in the Hanover School Division. The EAs had been on strike for 3 weeks, but yesterday, 83% voted in favor of a new deal from the Southeast Manitoba School Division. The new contract includes an immediate wage increase of 6.3%, much of it retroactive. Jeff Dewick is the executive director of the Christian Labour Association of Canada. He says the work isn't done and will resume when the contract expires in 2026.
What we're running into again is some pretty big funding challenges. The last government kind of really restricted school divisions' abilities to tax and therefore increase their income. And the new government has been silent. We haven't heard anything about a new funding model. They haven't spoken at all about the strike. And so really there's a disappointment level there that we're not doing better for what is our future. Our future is our schools and our young people and our students.
The Hanover School Division this morning thanked parents and caregivers for their understanding during the strike. A pedestrian is dead after a crash last night on the south edge of the city. It happened just after 10 on Pembina Highway near the Cloverleaf Exchange at the south perimeter. Police say a 21-year-old was driving north when a woman on the street was hit. She died of her injuries in hospital. Police are now asking anyone who might have video or dash cam footage of the crash to give investigators a call. Well, it might be a bit too soon to start dreaming about skating the Nestawaya River Trail at the Forks this winter, but it's not too early to start thinking about how you'll keep warm and entertained while you skate. 6 new warming huts were unveiled at the Forks today. The designs are chosen through a competition that is put on by the Forks. It had more than 200 submissions this time around. Today, we got a bit of a look at the winners that'll be on the ice. Forks CEO Sarah Stasiak says it can be hard for the jury to pick which huts will join the collection because so much thought goes into each entry.
These huts are designed and built by people for people. They're plunked down on the rivers to be explored, admired, and enjoyed by anyone and everyone. So this year's new hut designs are again unique and very diverse. Each hut has its own meaning, it tells its own story, and I can't wait for you to learn more about all 6 of them.
Among the new additions is a giant catfish, a giant eagle, and a dim sum game. Now, if you want to see more, you can head to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Well, 'tis the season again where one of the most cherished traditions for many is decorating your own Christmas tree. Unfortunately, though, there are many who cannot afford to have one. But a Winnipeg resident is giving Christmas trees to families in need. CBC's Zubina Ahmed brings us more.
What do you think we should put in this box? This is going to go to a family that has a small child.
Kimberly Cable is brightening many households this Christmas. She's been helping families with Christmas trees and decorations for 3 years.
I believe that Christmas always starts with the tree and the decorations and the lights and how it brings smiles, and it just escalates from there. Through many hands, I reach out, communities are reaching back to make a difference, to help families.
Boy or girl, do you know?
Cable's helping heart comes from some of her dark experiences in the past. In 2009, she had a car accident and she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. 2 years later, she experienced homelessness because of more struggles in her life.
I myself deal with a lot of depression, And so it gets me out, right? It impels me to get up, keep moving. There's people that need help.
So Vern, these are what we're going to take to this house.
Cable says she learned about the importance of giving from her father, and it continues to guide her actions to help others. When the pandemic hit, Cable saw people in her neighborhood struggling. She took to St. James' social media pages to ask for donations of trees and ornaments. Her family and friends helped her assemble boxes and deliver.
The response was incredible. I think we're well over 120 families that we've helped since 2020, and it just grows. This cannot be made possible without the people in Winnipeg making this happen. I'm the voice. They reach back, and the donations come.
Ho, ho, ho.
Awesome, thank you.
Cable delivered this Christmas tree to Judy Smith. Smith has 3 sons with disabilities and is struggling to make ends meet.
I didn't think I was going to have a Christmas for them, but a tree is good. I mean, she made us happy. It's like a special gift. Thank you. Can I give you a hug? You bet.
Zabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Thank you.
CBC meteorologist John Sauter is with us now, and boy, oh boy, John, walking out the door this morning for a walk, and you
could feel it.
You could feel the bite on your face.
Yeah, I think this was the first day I really felt winter sort of settling in.
Yeah, in the blink of an eye.
In the blink of an eye, yeah, it happens quickly. Here's some good news, though. We are going to see a bit of a milding trend starting tomorrow, but here's a look at the current temperatures. At the airport, we are at minus 13. It's been dropping 2 degrees an hour for the past 3 or 4 hours. We did make it to about minus 7 this afternoon. Last I checked, the Forks was still minus 9, so a little bit warmer downtown. West winds now at 13, and these winds will shift to the west and then southwest tomorrow, which is going to bring in some slightly milder air. Look at the lack of cloud cover here across southern Manitoba, central, most of the north. We still have a low pressure system situated out over Hudson Bay, which is still circulating winds gusting to about 70 kilometers per hour in through Churchill and York regions. That will also settle down a little bit as that low starts to move off. It's also producing a bit of snow along the shoreline here in the York area and south of Churchill, but still some blowing and drifting snow. I've been checking visibilities in that area today. They've been still consistently pretty good, up around 16 to 24 kilometers per hour. You can see that the winds will start to shift a little more westerly. Winds move in parallel with these dark lines you see, and we'll see things kind of spreading out as far as the ISO bars here, areas of equal barometric pressure connected by these lines. So as that gets a little farther apart, the winds drop off, and they will overnight. And then the winds will shift a little more southwesterly for us tomorrow. We've got a weak system moving some light flurries, afternoon flurries through Churchill and Gillam and maybe down through God's Lake on Friday afternoon, but a separate system starts to organize into Saturday morning across western sections of northern Manitoba and right across northern Saskatchewan. This is a system that has a cold front that will start to organize and spread into southern Manitoba by Saturday evening. So here's a look at 4:30 on Saturday. By the time we get into around 9 or 10 o'clock, we're into some accumulating snow. This is about 2 or 3 centimeters Saturday evening and overnight. This is more like 5 to 10 centimeters on the east side of Lake Winnipeg. Lakes are still open, so we're still producing some lake effect snow on top of the snow that is with that system that is moving on through. So as we get into tomorrow morning, we see winds more westerly, and then tomorrow afternoon more southwesterly, but still fairly strong. Still up around 20 to 35 or 40 kilometers per hour in the Winnipeg area. We don't have far to go here. Minus 15 the low. We're already at minus 13, minus 9 in the morning. And with that southwest wind, we will start to warm up quickly all the way to minus 2 in the afternoon. Southwest winds at 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. And then minus 1 on Saturday. There's the snow. The cloud and the snow move in quite late in the day. We will see clearing on Sunday with a morning temperature at minus 4, an afternoon temperature at minus 9. So it will feel a lot colder with windy conditions out of the northwest again on Sunday. Riley?
Think I better turn my furnace on tonight, John.
Yeah, maybe.
Thank you. Well, Cree beading artist Cynthia Boehm spent 2 years recreating a pair of her grandma's gauntlets to honor her memory. She was inspired to learn beading after she found her great-grandmother's beadwork in the Manitoba Museum. CBC Indigenous' Kevin Nipatabo spent time with her at her home in Selkirk.
If I stop beading tomorrow, I'm content knowing that I had this experience and learned from my grandmother. Beading was always a part of my childhood and my community, and it was something I was always fascinated with. I was inspired and I always wanted to learn, but it wasn't until I was 50 years old I learned from an Indigenous artist in Winnipeg. I remember my grandmother and even my mother with her sewing materials. They kept their supplies in those little cookie tins, and you kind of always thought there was some chocolates or cookies in there, and you'd only find sewing supplies. I really thought about what my mom said many years ago. She said Granny had a pair of moccasins in a museum. So at that time, I inquired, giving the Manitoba Museum, Dr. Maureen Matthews, very limited information of my grandmother's name. With that limited information, Dr. Maureen Matthews took that and she found a collection of my grandmother's beading. It was emotional, finding my grandmother's work, because I always wanted to have a piece of, of her work. My most recent project is, I always say, I call it a project of love, because it's the most special project I've ever had an opportunity to do, was recreating my great-grandmother's elaborately beaded gauntlets.
When Cynthia approached us about the project to recreate, I was so excited for her, and so excited every time she came in to study these and color match all the beads. It was so incredible to watch her work and to chat with her about the work. And it makes me know a lot more about the collection too, so it's a learning thing for me as well. It was a project where I wanted to ask others for help, but I wanted it to be a personal journey between my grandmother and I. And throughout the project, I felt her spirit was with me, and I let her spirit guide me and say, this is okay. There was times where I became frustrated because it is an elaborately beaded project. And I was thinking of my grandmother, and a lot of times I talked to her like she was there. And I said, oh, this is getting harder. I was frustrated, and it's like I would hear my grandmother say what she used to always say when we misbehaved when we were young. Oh, you foolish little girls. And I thought of her saying that, and she would tap our behinds a little bit, and that was a memory that came up, and she was always so encouraging. This project too also really connected me to my siblings, and to in visiting, we talked about our grandparents a lot. We talked about our childhood with them in our lives. Connecting with beadwork is just the most beautiful feeling in the world. It's where I feel content. And if there's something you love, follow that. Follow your heart. You don't know where that will take you.
Still ahead tonight, we're learning more about the hostage deal and the planned pause in fighting in Gaza. We'll have that story still ahead. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. A pause in the fighting between Israel and Hamas will begin tomorrow. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a temporary ceasefire in return for the release of dozens of Israeli hostages. Some Palestinians being held in Israel prisons will be released as well. We get the latest from the CBC's Sasha Petrusek.
With a deal done in Qatar,
the beginning of the pause will be 7 a.m. Friday.
Israelis sang in Tel Aviv, daring to believe 13 women and children being held hostage will be free tomorrow afternoon.
I want to hope, I hope that it's going to happen.
Hoping also that all 240 of those kidnapped by the militant group Hamas will follow.
And 13 is nothing next to the amount we want to have back.
Once the first group leaves through this crossing into Egypt, Israel's committed to start releasing Palestinian women and teens from its jails in exchange, 150 in all. Up to 300 aid trucks will also be allowed in every day. But for those in Gaza who woke up to this again today, Israeli missiles pounding their neighborhood, sending children to hospital. It's the 4-day pause in airstrikes they want most, though they don't trust it'll happen. What kind of truce, he asks? They are attacking children. Israel insists it is after Hamas and that the short break will be followed by more determined fighting.
But we'll continue with our war aims, namely to eradicate Hamas.
Still, negotiators believe they can yet turn this pause into a full stop.
And of course, our aim is for this deal to end with a lasting truce.
A deal that's the first hopeful sign in almost 7 weeks of fighting. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Toronto.
Meantime, there are growing concerns tonight about journalists, particularly Palestinian journalists, who are covering the Israel-Hamas war. Calls are getting louder for better protections for those who are reporting on the fighting. Chris Brown has the story from London.
As soon as Salim knew his job could get him killed. As journalists in Gaza, we're subject to being targeted, he said on Instagram. Saturday morning, he shot this video of the aftermath of an Israeli strike on the Boreja refugee camp. Hours later, he was among 31 people killed in a follow-up strike on the same area. His devastated family, now sheltering at a Gaza school, spoke to a Palestinian journalist working for CBC News. He didn't have a tank or a plane or weapons to fight back, said his mother. My son died because he was trying to deliver the voice of truth. Besides Gaza, 3 journalists in Lebanon have been killed by Israeli strikes, 2 of them on Tuesday, making this the deadliest month since casualty records started being kept 30 years ago, says this advocate.
So the situation is absolutely horrendous. What we're seeing really is the elimination by Israel of journalism in Gaza.
In a statement to CBC News, Israel's military said the IDF has never and will never deliberately target journalists, but then added certain journalists who were reportedly killed were active terror operatives.
Israel says it is not deliberately targeting journalists, but at the same time it has refused to put the protections in place that are required under international humanitarian law to ensure that journalists in conflict can continue their jobs safely.
0. There's no safe place.
Min Kudari is a freelancer who regularly files for Turkish television.
We don't have a place to sleep and we're displaced and we're also striving to have food just like hundreds of thousands of other people.
There's also a vicious information war to contend with. An Israeli politician said journalists should be hunted down after a false account was posted that some took part in the October 7th massacres.
Reporters Without Borders is among the groups calling for an end to the dangerous rhetoric and for the International Criminal Court to investigate the killing of journalists. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The FBI has confirmed that yesterday's dramatic vehicle explosion at the Rainbow Bridge in Niagara Falls, New York, was not linked to terrorism. 2 people died and a border guard was injured in that incident. It happened at one of the busiest border crossings between Canada and the U.S. Now, the Rainbow Bridge has since reopened to traffic in the last hour. Ithel Musa has more now on the impact on the Canadian side of the border.
Police in western New York State are combing through what little is left behind after a fiery car crash Wednesday abruptly closed the Rainbow Bridge, linking Niagara Falls, Ontario to Niagara Falls, New York. The car on the American side of the bridge suddenly accelerated before flying through the air and exploding into flames. For some, thoughts immediately turned to the possibility of terrorism.
The hair in the back of my neck stood up, and I thought, here we go again.
In the chaos that followed, the Prime Minister and the U.S. President were briefed. 3 other nearby crossings were also closed. The FBI now confirms no explosive materials were found at the scene. Local police have taken over what's being called a traffic investigation. But on this American Thanksgiving weekend, a normally busy travel time left this unusual sight. The Rainbow Bridge empty.
All of a sudden, everybody's holiday plans were halted when the borders closed, and everybody shuddered.
The holiday would normally pack this Indian restaurant on the Canadian side of the border.
I feel so miserable. I don't know what's happening. All of a sudden, the Niagara Falls has nothing in here. This is the weekend when we get so busy. It's Thursday, Thanksgiving weekend, and nobody's around. I'll say by the table-wise, yes, 15, 20 tables at this time. I should have it, yes.
Police say the vehicle was incinerated in the crash. The 2 occupants are dead. American media is reporting they were a local Western New York couple. Ithel Musa, CBC News, Niagara Falls, Ontario.
The World Health Organization has requested and received data from China on an apparent rise in children's respiratory infections. And it echoes the lead up to the pandemic, though scientists say any alarm is premature. The same words, undiagnosed pneumonia, were used in the WHO request of China 4 years ago. But experts stress it's a regular part of international monitoring and that the increase may reflect such familiar infections like influenza and COVID itself. They also say most countries registered similar increases in the wake of lifted pandemic restrictions. Crandall University in Moncton, New Brunswick has parted ways with a high-profile professor. As Katie Nicholson tells us, it comes after a 6-month investigation into allegations of inappropriate conduct, which first came to light through an anonymous Instagram account.
Evangelicals are people who believe that God's given us something important to do.
John Stackhouse Jr. is a prominent theologian.
It's good to be at another college chapel.
Author of many books, including one on feminism and Christianity, and up until Wednesday, a celebrated professor at Crandall University, a private Christian school in Moncton, New Brunswick. After a 6-month investigation into allegations of inappropriate behavior, the university announced it terminated his employment. Although the report doesn't identify Stackhouse by name, CBC News has determined Stackhouse is the faculty member referenced. In the summary, the investigator determined the faculty member's classroom antics constitute sexual harassment and bordered on abuse of authority. In another instance, he determined his conduct with a female student was a classic case of grooming. In a stunning show of transparency, Crandall publicly released the investigator's summary report.
Would it have been easier to just try to sweep this under the carpet? Perhaps, but it was not what was right and honest.
All of this began after an anonymous Instagram account popped up in March, populated with student allegations of harassment. That prompted a few alumni, like Michaela Burke, to pen an online petition demanding an investigation.
It's just been a really sort of overwhelming rush of emotions, for sure.
For the women who pushed for the investigation, reading the final report has been vindicating.
When you finally see that it wasn't just you or it wasn't just the couple people you might know, and it's actually like a true and honest series of events that unfortunately occurred, and that's what was found, like it's really just like a sigh of relief.
We repeatedly reached out to John Stackhouse for comment on this matter. So far, he hasn't responded. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can catch more on this story Sunday night on The National, where we hear from students who pushed for the investigation. We'll also delve into the professor's past at a previous college. Hope of rescue for workers who are trapped in a collapsed tunnel in northern India has hit another snag today. What officials are calling the final phase had to be stopped after the drilling machine's platform became unstable, adding more delay for the 41 people who have been stranded inside for 12 days now. The workers are being supplied with hot meals and fresh air through 2 separate pipes. Earlier this month, a landslide caused a portion of the highway tunnel under construction to collapse. An anti-EU, anti-immigration party's election victory in the Netherlands has sent shockwaves right across Europe. At the helm of the party is Geert Wilders, who is known as the Dutch Donald Trump. Abby Kudassen now on the man who appears likely to become the next Dutch Prime Minister.
He's been called the Donald Trump of Europe, and now Geert Wilders has won a general election in the Netherlands after being in Dutch Parliament for 25 years. He's a far-right politician who's been criticized for his extreme rhetoric. Britain once banned him from entering the country. Wilders has received multiple death threats throughout his career and has been living in various safe houses for nearly 2 decades. He has long taken an anti-Islam stance in a country where Muslims make up about 5% of the population. Wilders has vowed to ban the Quran, close mosques, and heavily slash immigration. His party has now secured 37 seats, but he will need to find coalition partners to form a government. This isn't unusual in the Netherlands and has been known to take months.
We all have to be reasonable, we have to be responsible, and we have to compromise on many issues to make sure that those votes are getting worth their money.
If Wilders is successful, he will be a fresh thorn in the European Union's side. He has previously called for Nexit, taking his country out of the bloc.
Whenever he forms a government, he will have to compromise, and it's unlikely that he finds parties that will agree on this radical stance. The UK, being an island, having a big history as an empire, may have had the idea that it could do without Europe. But for a small country that is completely trade dependent like the Netherlands, it's really not a feasible prospect.
He did say Wilders could play a spoiler role in Brussels, similar to Hungary's Viktor Orban. Wilders has opposed new EU members and is against sending weapons to Ukraine. Populist parties across Europe have more than doubled their vote share in the last 3 decades. Slovakia elected an anti-EU populist just a couple of months ago. Italy brought in its most far-right government since World War II just last year. And an election is looming in France in 2027 when a Marine Le Pen presidency is no longer a far-fetched possibility. Abby Kudassen, CBC News, Berlin.
Still ahead, electric buses have been heralded as a way to cut greenhouse gas emissions. But one Canadian city has had nothing but trouble with their zero-emission fleet. That story just ahead. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Well, buses are all about stops, but Edmonton's recently acquired electric vehicles have created more interruptions than expected. That is eliciting frustration on one hand and assurances on the other that green transit is still the way of the future. The CBC's Madeline Cummings reports.
3 years ago, former Mayor Don Iveson said the city's newly purchased electric buses would save the city money.
These super efficient buses will help us long into the future.
But that isn't the case. Those buses have actually been racking up repair costs. Proterra, the company that manufactured the 60 buses Edmonton ordered, filed for bankruptcy protection in the U.S. this summer. And a document filed as part of that case shows the city has had numerous problems with the vehicles, from battery life to software.
There was only 16 of the Proterra buses that were able to go on the road this morning. The rest of them are broken down, and for the most part, they're waiting for parts, and it takes a long time to get the parts for them. We've had some that have been down for over a year waiting for parts.
Drivers have complained to the union.
A small person or a big person has a lot of trouble driving it. They just don't fit in that cab.
The city is seeking more than $1 million in these bankruptcy proceedings, plus assurances that its contracts will be honored. In a statement, a city spokesperson says the city will take all necessary steps to preserve its rights. Proterra didn't respond to a request for comment. Experts say this news is concerning, but it doesn't mean the electric bus industry as a whole is in trouble.
When it comes to zero-emission buses and trucks, the sort of sales globally, I think excluding China, have tripled in the past 5 years. So we're seeing about an annual growth of about 33%.
And the good news for Edmonton is batteries should keep getting better.
There's an enormous amount of money being poured into battery technologies. So it will get there. I think electric buses will be part of our future. Whether it's these buses or other buses, I don't know. But yeah, they'll play a part for sure.
Also playing a role, hydrogen buses, which produce no exhaust pipe emissions. Edmonton is currently testing one hydrogen bus with plans to adapt 2 diesel buses to use the emerging fuel. Madeline Cummings, CBC News, Edmonton.
A Regina neighborhood has its own community Christmas tree this year, but just like the Nativity, it is setting on the humble side. It's in the middle of the street above a pothole.
Oh, about a month ago, the little Christmas tree went up and somebody came along and put a stand underneath it and lights and then presents and socks.
So the pothole appeared in July, but is due to be fixed early next month. That is leaving the tree's fate for Christmas Day a little bit uncertain.
Weather Update is brought to you by the art and beauty of the National Ballet of Ukraine. January 29th at the Burton Cummings Theatre. Tickets at nationalballetukraine.com.
Meteorologist John Sauter's back. I'm sure there are a few potholes around the neighborhood here.
Yeah, some of the trees that covered our potholes would be a little larger, though.
Yeah, I think so. You were saying still a very windy day in parts of northern Manitoba.
You know, I saw wind gusts earlier in Churchill up around 72. We're still very windy there, but the good news is winds are dropping off. Here's a look at the current conditions in Churchill. Now northwest, or still northwest, 44, and still gusting to 61. Temperature minus 10 right now in the city of Churchill, so some pretty gusty conditions. You look at our temperatures here, and boy, Winnipeg at the airport really dropping off quickly. But downtown, we're still at minus 9. It's minus 12 down the road in Morris, minus 11 Steinbach, and minus 7 up around Lake Manitoba. We do have minus double digits in the west, and pretty much what you would expect for this time of night. Normal low now is minus 13, so yeah, it's going to be a bit of a chilly night. I think we'll drop to about minus 15 in Winnipeg tonight. These are the current numbers across the north. Of course, factor in some pretty gusty winds. The closer you are to Hudson Bay, the windier it is because of that low that is situated right out over the bay right now. Otherwise, a very clear province, and that's why temperatures are dropping so fast. I've been dropping a couple of degrees an hour now for the last few hours, minus 11 in Kenora and Fort Francis and Dryden. Those are the forecast lows for tonight. So in most cases, those numbers are already being achieved. Same with across the south here, down to minus 15 or minus 16 in the Winnipeg area. Clear skies here in the southwest, a little bit more cloud up around areas like Barons River, Pinawa, closer to the lakes. Winds will shift to the west and bring some of that moisture toward you. Low tonight, minus 14 in Brandon, minus 11s in Dauphin, Portage, and Morden. And then across the north, we still have the gusty winds, of course, in Churchill, and temperatures dropping into the mid-minus teens. Warmer in Island Lake at -7, and then tomorrow more like a -4. And we do have some afternoon flurries being produced off that same low over Hudson Bay that will move into Churchill and into Gillam. But look at these warm temperatures. Windy, yes, in the Paw, but sunny and +1. Sunny and 1 in Flin Flon, and -1 with sunshine in the Thompson area. So some very warm numbers in the north for tomorrow. Here in the south, we will warm up. Little gusty in Dauphin, out of the west, gusting to 50, but lots of -1s, -2s, -3s, a -2 for Winnipeg. Nothing but sunshine for us for our Friday afternoon. Kind of like today, a clear or cloud-free sky. Same true for northwestern Ontario, with highs between -2 and -4 for your Friday afternoon.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
Coming up, we'll hear how the slogan, "You Got This," is being put on sweaters by a Winnipegger to honor a friend lost to suicide. The sweater is out tomorrow, but the story is coming up after the break. Stay with us. Well, this past summer, Winnipegger Jasmine Lane received the type of phone call that people dread. It was someone calling to inform her that a close friend, Marshall Brandt, had died by suicide. To honor him, Jasmine has created a sweatshirt that reads, "You got this." It officially comes out tomorrow with proceeds going to the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention. Jasmine spoke in studio with CBC's Marcy Marcusa.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Thank you. You never really get over it, but I'm grateful that there's something good coming out of this.
I just wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing with listeners a little bit about Marshall and what he was like.
Oh my goodness. Marshall was such a beautiful soul. He was so unbelievably creative, very funny. But unfortunately, you know, and we were together for about 8 years together in a relationship, and then an additional 2 years just kind of being best friends and trying to deal with life outside of each other. And he was just always, he was the best. I don't know, he was my best friend. One of the last things that I said to him ever was how I miss my best bud. And he was just amazing, but he always really struggled with being able to see that side of him. It's something I often say when you're depressed. Depression is a lie. It lies to you so that it can pull you in and become the only thing that you ever focus on. And I saw that a lot with him.
What's your hope with the actual campaign?
With the actual campaign, the awareness spread, I'm hoping obviously will speak to a lot of people. It's been shocking already, the amount of people that have reached out. You got this. It's an encouraging word for somebody behind you. You know, human beings nowadays, we tend to not pay as much attention to each other as we should. We tend to be a lot more focused on ourselves, which is terrible in my opinion. And I've seen the repercussions of that. So it's a nice message that you can give to somebody behind you without even having to talk to them. And they know that you are an advocate by wearing this. And then it says, "I got this" on the front of the shirt, as well as a reminder to yourself. And I'm hoping just as a whole, we really want to just create a community of people, because it's so easy to be silent. It's so easy to keep on moving forward in your life when there are so many people that are really struggling around you who are afraid to ask for help.
So can you show us your tattoo?
Yeah, I have one right here, actually. I got this a few months prior to his passing, because he and I used to say, "You got this" to each other all the time.
Where can people get them? What's the best place if someone's listening?
The best place would probably be online, just because that's easier to do. You can do that at heymattandco.com. And of course, we will be in store at Hey Matt & Co. They're just located inside of Kildonan Place Mall by the big new fancy entrance where the Marshalls and HomeSense is.
Let's talk about the portion of the proceeds going to the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention. Beyond the message, why was that critical for you?
They have so many incredible resources for people, especially for grieving families and friends of somebody who has taken their life. CASP for us was really easy, because there were so many of their resources in the months following Marshall's death that I used, and I found them to be incredibly helpful.
So before you go this morning, what will you remember most, or maybe what do you miss most about your friend?
Everything is not a good enough answer. Honestly, we were just best friends. Like, he was my best friend. And I don't think that I'll ever find somebody again that I just click with so much like him. And I know that, you know, towards the end there, we couldn't be together. It wasn't healthy for us to be together in a relationship anymore. But he's my forever best friend. And I'll always miss that, because I'll never find somebody like him again.
You're doing a beautiful thing in his honor, Jasmine.
Thank you. Sorry for crying.
It's okay. It's okay. All the emotions welcome. It's important work, and it's an important message to get out. Thank you for sharing your friend's story and a piece of your life story with us as well.
Now, stories like these can be upsetting, and there are plenty of resources that you can reach out to. If you need help, Talk Suicide Canada is always there. The number is on your screen, 1-833-456-4566. You can also text 45645 in the evenings, or you can also call Kids Help Phone at 1-800-668-6868. Still ahead, meteorologist John Sauter is back with your 7-day forecast, and we've got a daily lift for you as well. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News.
Well, if you are one of those who wants weather slightly milder than today, I have that for you. And if you're looking for a little bit of snow, I have that for you as well. That arrives on Saturday night. So we get into the mild, breezy conditions here. Lots of sunshine again tomorrow and on Saturday until late in the day when we start to see this area of snow move through. This will be about 2 to 3 centimeters. Clearing on Sunday with falling temperatures through the day. That -9 is for the afternoon. And then maybe a few more flurries on Monday and slightly warmer again on into next week. Dozens of Santa's elves are hard at work for thousands of children in 26 remote First Nations.
Staff at Manitoba, Kiwatnawi-Okamakinak were busy today scooping candy into bags and picking up goodies for Santa to deliver, and that is tonight's Daily Lift.
We are very excited to have our Santa Express go out into communities again this year. We serve 26 communities in MKO territory. We have about at least 20,000 little bags that we ship out to these communities. It's ultimately because of the kids. It is a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of coordination, but at the end of the day, when you see the kids and the smiles that they have on their faces, it's worth the while and it's worth the energy and time it takes to do this.
Very nice, and very quickly, MKO is using a plane, a helicopter, and a snowmobile to take Santa around next month.
Oh, that sounds great.
Sounds great. Have a great evening. We'll see you at 11.
See you later.